But before agreeing to go back, Linda made the Spectre promise that hers and pre-crisis Superman's daughter Ariella would still live. And so the Spectre agreed to that. And so what ended up happening was that Ariella became the Supergirl who appeared in the event DC 1 million. So Linda was sent back to the post-crisis reality. Kara got sent back to the pre-crisis reality. Her memories of being in the post-crisis reality were swept away, so that she had no idea what the future laid in store for her. So her entire pre-crisis history unfolded as it was meant to. So nothing about pre-crisis history was changed as a result of the storyline. Very well done by Peter David. And now, while Kara's memories were wiped, and so she wouldn't experience any trauma from this event, Linda's memories were not erased. They were intact. And so she was incredibly guilt and grief stricken upon returning, to the point that she told her parents that she needed to move on. She needed to find a new place in life. She had atoned for all the things that she had done in her earlier days, and she just needed to go away. And she also left a letter for Lois and Clark, saying that she was terribly sorry. She felt like she'd let them down. She could not continue to wear the S shield. She could not continue to be Supergirl, and goodbye. And so a few months later, readers were introduced to the pre-Flashpoint Supergirl. And, of course, in 2002, this was a time where DC was embracing its legacy, but also the mindset was that certain characters really needed to be brought back to their more iconic roots. Dan DiDio in particular was a big proponent of this. He talked about how it was so hard to introduce new readers to the post-crisis incarnations of certain characters because their origins just seemed so complex, so convoluted. And he referred specifically to Supergirl. And he said, it's so much easier to tell a new fan that Supergirl is Superman's cousin than it is to say that Supergirl is a matrix of protoplasmic material given artificial intelligence by a Lex Luthor from a pocket dimension who crossed over into our reality and became an earthborn angel of fire. And so clearly DiDio wanted a Supergirl who was basically the pre-crisis Supergirl with a modern take. And so we were introduced to the pre-Flashpoint Supergirl in the pages of Superman Batman. The pre-Flashpoint Supergirl was created by Jeff Loeb with Michael Turner as the artist. And here the explanation was that Supergirl was Kara Zor-El. She was Superman's cousin from Krypton. She had also escaped the destruction. However, Supergirl was actually older than Superman. The explanation was that Kal-El was rocketed from Krypton as a baby. Kara, however, was in her mid-teens. And the idea was that she would be sent in a separate rocket. She would follow her cousin to Earth. And when they got to Earth, Kara would raise Kal-El and no doubt instill various Kryptonian virtues within him. But tragically, her rocket went off course. She ended up spending I guess, better part of 30 plus years in suspended animation with her rocket orbiting the Earth, meaning that she took in a much greater level of solar radiation than her cousin. And by the time her rocket finally got back on course, landed on Earth, she discovered that her cousin had grown up and become Superman. Please, DC Comics and Melissa Benoist, don't sue me. And so the post-crisis Supergirl, or not the post-crisis Supergirl, excuse me, the pre-Flashpoint Supergirl was a fellow Kryptonian survivor who, due to having so many more years of direct exposure to the sun's rays, was actually more powerful than Superman. And so the ramifications of that would be a theme of the pre-Flashpoint Supergirl's title, which came out after, or was it before, or generally around the time of Infinite Crisis. And so it was the pre-Flashpoint Supergirl, the Kara Zor-El, who also survived Krypton's destruction, came to Earth, was more powerful than her cousin, but had the same power set. This was the Supergirl who would become the model for the New 52 and the Rebirth era Supergirls. Really, the history has stayed intact. The idea that Supergirl is chronologically older than Superman, but physically is younger due to her being in suspended animation for so many years. The idea that she feels more like a fish out of water because when she emerged on Earth, she was in her mid-teens and still had all her memories of growing up on Krypton, as compared to her cousin who grew up on Earth and tends to see himself as more human than Kryptonian at times. I mean, really, in the Supergirl book right now, things have been tweaked so that it really lines up with the TV show. So Supergirl's civilian identity is Kara Danvers. She was adopted by the Danvers family, and she works at the DEO. And it was a pre-Flashpoint Supergirl who appeared in Infinite Crisis and beyond. So really, the Linda Danvers Supergirl was pretty well done with the end of the Peter David run. And to put a stamp on it, after the conclusion of Infinite Crisis, Dan DiDio announced that in the post-Infinite Crisis reality, the Linda Danvers Matrix Supergirl was no longer in continuity. She didn't exist, which sparked a minor uproar on message boards at the time. Jeff Johns, when he got back from holiday, heard about the outcry and said, huh? It wasn't my idea to retcon her out of existence. It wasn't me. But pretty well, the pre-Flashpoint Supergirl supplanted the post-crisis Supergirl. So, were there any appearances by post-crisis Supergirl after Infinite Crisis? Well, actually, there was. Even around the time of Infinite Crisis, there was the miniseries Reign in Hell, in which Linda Danvers appeared and she was actually taken to hell. Apparently, she still had debts to repay. But in this miniseries, Linda Danvers had naturally blonde hair, and she was manifesting the angel wings of fire. And it really, really angered fans that Linda appeared in this way. So much so that there are a number of Linda Danvers Supergirl fans who say that that story should not be considered in canon at all. Because how did Linda Danvers end up with naturally blonde hair? And why was she manifesting angels' wings. That was Matrix who ended up with that. So it just did not make sense. Peter David, for his part, would start up a series at DC, and he would later carry it on to IDW, called Fallen Angel. And the main character, Lee, appeared to be based on the Linda Danvers Supergirl. In fact, it's been said that Fallen Angel was Peter David's way of doing things that he couldn't do within the Supergirl book, because it was still a book about Supergirl. So for all he did a whole lot of look at angels and demons during his run, Fallen Angel allowed him to put the Supergirl aspect aside and really focus on this idea of a fallen angel on Earth. And where some controversy really came in was when David introduced a character called Lynn in Fallen Angel. And a lot of fans said, oh, that must be Linda Danvers, to which Peter David cheekily responded with words to the effect of, well, for legal purposes, I can't say that Lynn is Linda Danvers, but come on, it's obvious. So you could look at Fallen Angel as a nice way of looking at Linda Danvers post-Supergirl. As for the Matrix Supergirl, she did appear in that 2-issue Matrix Supergirl Convergence tie that I talked about in episode 101. And for me, that story fell flat because Keith Giffen was going for the funny, the blah-ha-ha. It really didn't feel like a story from the 90s, specifically the time of death and return of Superman. Matrix Supergirl in that Convergence time, she came off as painfully, woefully naive. Like, reading Giffen's story, I found myself screaming in my head saying, how can this girl take such verbal abuse from this guy? He's not pretending to protect her or hold her back. He's just being so mean to her. And in the end, yeah, it was nice to see her give Lex II his just desserts, but it felt like a very unfortunate way of ending Matrix Supergirl's appearance in the current or ongoing DC continuity. So sadly, I think that's probably it in terms of appearances for both Linda Danvers and Matrix Supergirl. It's a fascinating run of comics to look at, and thank goodness so much of it is available in trade and digitally now. Very different from the Kara Zor-El that we've had since 2002, and certainly worth checking out. So I hope that you have enjoyed listening to this curious case of the Supergirl recording as much as I've enjoyed putting it together. For episodes 103 and 104, I'm going to return to my Spotlight series. Episode 103 will take a look at Alan Scott, Earth's first Green Lantern during the Copper Age, i.e. 1986 through 1994. And then for episode 104, I'll take a look at the John Byrne run on Wonder Woman. Looking forward to having you with me for those and other upcoming episodes of Comics and History. Just quickly, the email address is comicsandhistory@gmail.com. I'll be back with episode 103, looking at the Keeper of the Emerald Flame, Alan Scott, in 2 weeks. So until another 14 days have come and gone, this class is dismissed.